She thought tonight would be the happiest moment of her life. The lights were perfect, her dress was perfect. And when he dropped to one knee, her heart nearly burst. But seconds after she said, yes, he started laughing because it wasn't a proposal. It was a prank. A prank he planned for views. What she did next didn't just break their relationship. It broke him. The restaurant was glowing with warm lights, the kind that make everything look a little softer, a little safer, like nothing bad could possibly happen within its walls. She sat there in her favorite blue dress, trying to steady the flutter in her chest as the people she loved chatted around her. Every few minutes, she found herself touching her manicured nails, the ones she got done that morning because she truly believed tonight might be the night. Then it happened, the sound of his chair scraping back, the sudden hush that fell over the room. When she looked up and saw him lowering himself onto one knee, the air seemed to thicken. Her heartbeat wasn't just loud, it was deafening. In that instant, every dream she had ever quietly whispered into the dark finally felt like it was stepping into the light. She didn't even notice the other diners turning to watch, or the way her friends exchanged excited glances. All she saw was him. The man she had loved for 6 years, the man she believed she would build a forever with. His voice trembled with the perfect amount of emotion, saying all the things she had always hoped to hear. And when he reached into his pocket, her breath caught mid-air. Tears flooded her vision, blurring the room into nothing but color and glitter. She said, yes, before the ring even appeared, because why wouldn't she? This was the moment every fight, every sacrifice, every year had been leading to. But then, in the time it takes for a heartbeat to fall out of rhythm, everything flipped. He shot up from the floor, arms wide, grinning not with love, but with triumph. It's a prank, he shouted. For a moment, she didn't understand. Her smile froze on her face, still shaped like the word yes. Laughter echoed around her, his laughter sharp and bright, cutting through her like broken glass. His friend appeared beside him with a phone, recording her shock as if it were just another funny moment for strangers online. She felt her heart plummet, not down her chest but somewhere deeper, somewhere that made her knees weak. The restaurant turned cold. People stared, unsure whether to look away or watch the train wreck happening right before them. Her tears, which seconds ago were born from joy, kept falling, but now they felt wrong, stolen. She stood up, gripping her purse with shaking hands, and fled. Behind her, he called out, telling her to relax, telling her it was just content, as if her dignity were something you could film, edit, and monetize. When she reached the sidewalk outside, the night air hit her like a slap. The city felt too loud, too bright, too full of strangers who suddenly seemed safer than the man she had come with. Her breath came out in uneven gasps as the realization settled. He hadn't just ruined a moment, he had ruined a dream. He had taken something sacred and turned it into a spectacle, a joke, a cheap grab for attention. And as she stood there under the streetlights, mascara streaking her cheeks, she felt something shift inside her. Something quiet but powerful. The kind of shift that happens when a person finally sees the truth without the softness of love blurring the edges. Tonight wasn't just the night he broke her heart. It was the night he unknowingly awakened a version of her that would never let this be the end of the story. Long before that disastrous night, their story has started the way most love stories do, softly, unexpectedly, beautifully. She was 21, still hopeful in the way people are before life teaches them its sharper lessons. He was charming in a way that felt effortless. The kind of charming that made people lean in without realizing it. They met at a friend's party, both reaching for the same bowl of chips, both laughing at how cliché it felt. But clichés are comforting when you're young. He made her feel seen in a room full of noise. They talked for hours about dreams, about childhood, about the kind of future they each imagined. And somewhere between midnight and sunrise, she had convinced herself she had found someone who spoke the same emotional language she did. Someone who understood her. Someone who would protect her heart rather than play with it. The early years felt easy, almost too easy. He would surprise her with spontaneous dates, call her his future, whisper promises that tasted sweet and believable. She supported his dreams, especially his ambition to build a YouTube career. It wasn't success she was in love with, it was the version of him he claimed he wanted to become. The hardworking man, the visionary, the storyteller. She believed in him. She thought loving someone meant helping them climb even when they weren't steady on their feet. And so she did the climbing for both of them, paying rent when he couldn't, covering dinners when his projects were slow, lending money for equipment he swore he needed. She told herself it wasn't a burden. It was teamwork. It was what partners did. She never realized she was giving more than love. She was giving him permission to take advantage. But love can make even the loudest warning bells sound like background noise, the criticisms mask as jokes. The subtle policing of her clothes. The little comments about her looks, her choices, her friends. He'd say, "I'm just helping you." And she believed him, even when the words chipped away at her confidence. The truth was there in plain sight, camouflaged beneath affection and routine. The imbalance grew slowly, quietly like a crack in a wall you don't notice until the whole structure starts to tilt. Yet she convinced herself it was normal. Every couple had flaws, right? Every relationship required compromise. And she did compromise, again and again, bending herself into smaller and smaller shapes just to keep the peace. If loneliness can exist inside love, she had lived inside that loneliness for years without even recognizing its name. Looking back, the signs were glaring. They weren't red flags, they were full billboards. But love, when mixed with hope, can be blinding. She wasn't naive. She was loyal. She believed that if she held everything together long enough, he would eventually meet her halfway. But he never did. Instead, she poured herself into a relationship that only filled him. She was the foundation, the fallback, the emotional cushion. And he was the dreamer who loved being the center of attention more than he loved the woman cheering behind him. Yet she stayed, not because she didn't know she deserved better, but because she believed he would eventually become the man he pretended to be in the beginning. 6 years of devotion. And not once did she imagine that the person she trusted most would be the one to bring her to her knees. That realization was still waiting for her in the days ahead, ready to hit her with the force of all the truth she had ignored. The moment she ran out of the restaurant, the night air felt heavier than anything she had ever breathed. It wasn't just cold, it was mocking. As if the city itself had witnessed her humiliation and didn't know how to comfort her. Her heels clicked hurriedly against the pavement, each step unsteady, each breath sharp and ragged. Moments earlier, she had been glowing under soft lights, surrounded by friends who believed they were about to witness a milestone in her life. Now she was a trembling shadow on a sidewalk, mascara burning her eyes, her heart fractured in a way she couldn't yet comprehend. She stood there, gripping her purse so tightly her fingers hurt, wondering how everything had gone from a dream to a nightmare in the span of a single heartbeat. How one man's joke had ripped through 6 years of memories like they meant nothing. He followed her outside, still chuckling, still convinced she would eventually get it, eventually laugh too. As if her tears were part of the script. As if pain was something she should be willing to endure for content. "Relax," he called out. It was just a prank. The words hit her like poison. Just a prank? She thought of every moment she had stood by him, encouraged him, believed in him. She thought of the mornings she woke up early to help him film, the nights she stayed up while he edited videos that never paid off. She thought of every sacrifice, every compromise, every time she had put his needs before her own. And now he expected her to swallow this humiliation with a smile, all because he wanted views? Her hands shook not just from embarrassment, but from the dawning realization that maybe she had never really known him at all. When the Uber finally arrived, she fell into the back seat like someone collapsing into safety after surviving a storm. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror, worry flickering in his eyes, but he didn't ask questions. Maybe he'd seen this before. Maybe heartbreak had become a routine sight in the city. She stared out the window, the streetlights blending into long golden streaks as the car moved. With every passing mile, numbness began replacing the initial shock. The tears slowed, not because the pain faded, but because her mind was spiraling into a different kind of clarity. She began replaying the moment, him kneeling, her crying from joy, the entire room watching, and then his laughter. It echoed in her ears so loudly she had to press her hands over them. It wasn't the prank that broke her. It was the way he looked proud of himself for doing it. By the time she reached the apartment, her heart felt hollow. She locked the door behind her, leaned against it, and slid to the floor. For the first time, her mind wandered past the humiliation and deeper into questions she had never dared to ask. Why had he chosen that moment? Why did he think it was funny? Why didn't he see her pain? But the question that hurt the most was the one she couldn't avoid. How long had he stopped caring? She cried until the floor beneath her was damp. She cried until exhaustion forced her body still. And somewhere in the quiet darkness of that bedroom, a truth she had avoided for years finally whispered back. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was the first moment she saw who he really was, and the last moment she could pretend otherwise. The split second that shattered her also marked the beginning of her awakening. In the days that followed, the silence between them felt louder than any argument they'd ever had. He moved around the apartment as if nothing had happened, humming, gaming, editing, acting like her pain was a temporary inconvenience he didn't have time to address. She watched him from the doorway, sometimes watched how easily he slipped back into comfort while she was still replaying the humiliation in her head. And it was in those quiet moments that she began remembering things she had ignored for far too long. The way he always insisted on choosing what they watched, what they ate, where they went. How he'd roll his eyes if she disagreed. How he'd make decisions for both of them without asking, as if her preferences were suggestions, not needs. Back then, she called it letting him lead. Now it felt more like she had handed him the reins of her life without even realizing she was doing it. There were other moments, too, little things that, on their own, didn't look dangerous. He would comment on her hair, saying it looked messy when she wore it natural. He'd criticize outfits that he claimed were too revealing or not flattering. He'd frame his words as concern, but the impact remained. She slowly began dressing for his comfort instead of her joy. And then there was the money. She had always been the stable one, the responsible one, the one who knew how to stretch a paycheck and save. Whenever he couldn't cover his half of the rent, she picked it up. When he needed new lights, new lenses, new software, she paid. He always promised he'd make it up to her when the channel blew up. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. She didn't realize until now that love shouldn't require this kind of blind financial loyalty. Love shouldn't feel like carrying someone else's weight indefinitely. The more she reflected, the clearer the patterns became. He never apologized, not sincerely. If he hurt her feelings, he'd twist the story until she ended up comforting him. If she confronted him about something, he'd accuse her of being too sensitive or overreacting. And each time she backed down, a tiny piece of her self-worth chipped away. She had started thinking before speaking, adjusting herself to avoid triggering his irritation, shrinking parts of herself so the relationship wouldn't shatter. What she once thought was compromise was really quiet surrender, a slow disappearance of the woman she had been before him. The prank hadn't created these wounds, it had simply ripped the bandages off, exposing all the bruises she had convinced herself were normal. One night, lying awake in her childhood bedroom, after she had finally left the apartment, she thought back on the girl she used to be. The version of herself who dreamed boldly, spoke freely, laughed loudly. Somewhere along the way, she had dimmed her own light for a man who only ever wanted a spotlight for himself. For years, she mistook control for care, manipulation for love, and disrespect for just his personality. But now, in the clarity of distance, she saw everything. The relationship she once thought was built on love had been quietly draining her. And the cruel prank, the public proposal that wasn't real, hadn't been the beginning of her heartbreak. It was the moment she finally woke up. A moment that forced her to confront a truth she had avoided for too long. Real love doesn't make you small. It makes you more. And she was about to discover just how much more she truly was. Leaving wasn't a dramatic movie scene. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no final speech delivered with trembling hands. It was quiet, almost eerily so. She woke up one morning in their apartment, sunlight filtering through the blinds, and realized she couldn't spend another day pretending things would get better. Her body felt heavy, like every cell was begging her to run. As she walked through the apartment, she didn't see home anymore. She saw evidence of everything she had carried alone. The equipment she bought for him, the bills she paid, the shared furniture that suddenly looked foreign. Every corner whispered a memory she no longer wanted. So she started packing, not angrily, not emotionally, but with a calm that comes only when a decision is finally made in the soul long before the mind admits it. Each item she folded into a box felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she had misplaced. He didn't fight for her, not really. When he realized she was serious, that she wasn't bluffing or being dramatic, he reacted the only way he knew how, defensively. He tried to flip the script, make her feel guilty, make her question herself. "You're really leaving over a joke?" he demanded. "I treated you like a queen that whole day." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they proved exactly how little he understood. Treating her to a spa for one morning didn't erase years of imbalance. One dinner didn't undo a pattern of disrespect. He still believed the prank was the problem, not the years of emotional erosion leading up to it. When he told her she was being unfair, something inside her hardened. She realized she would never get the apology she deserved, not because she wasn't worth it, but because he wasn't capable of giving it. For the first time, she didn't try to explain herself. She didn't soothe him. She stopped participating in the cycle. Packing her things became an unexpected journey through the truth. She found old receipts for equipment she had paid for, notes she left him that he never acknowledged, gifts she had bought during moments she thought were milestones, moments he barely remembered. She found pieces of herself in drawers and cabinets, pieces she had given freely because she believed he was building a future with her. Realizing he wasn't hurt her, but realizing she had ignored her own needs for so long hurt even more. Her best friend arrived halfway through packing, ready to help, ready to remind her she wasn't alone. Together they sorted through the mess, both the physical clutter and the emotional one. Every bag she filled felt lighter than expected. Every item she left behind felt symbolic. She wasn't abandoning a home. She was stepping out of a cage she didn't know she had been living in. When she closed the door for the final time, she didn't look back. Not because she wasn't sentimental, but because she had nothing left to salvage there. The hallway felt longer than she remembered, but with every step, her breath became easier. She wasn't just walking away from him, she was walking away from the version of herself who believed love required endless sacrifice. She was walking away from the fear of starting over, from the guilt that had kept her frozen for years, from the fantasy of a future he never intended to build with her. And though her hands trembled as she got into the car, something in her chest fluttered with unexpected relief. Leaving hurt but staying had been killing her slowly. For the first time in 6 years, she chose herself. She didn't know what awaited her on the other side of this ending, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The hardest part was already behind her. The truth didn't arrive gently. It didn't knock, it didn't whisper, it didn't tiptoe into her life. It barged in messy, sharp, and unforgiving. She had already moved back into her parents' home, finally exhaling after days of emotional chaos, when a message from an unknown number appeared on her phone. The moment she opened it, her stomach dropped. A coworker of his. A man she had met only once or twice. "I think he's staying with a girl from the office," the message said. Her breath caught. She read it again, then again, hoping the words would somehow change. But they didn't. The coworker hesitated before giving the name, almost apologizing through the screen. Saraya, a name she knew. A name she had heard casually sprinkled into conversations. A name she had never once questioned, because love teaches you to trust even when you shouldn't. Now that name felt like a blade pressed against her chest. When she called her best friend to tell her, the disbelief quickly morphed into anger on her behalf. But she didn't scream. She didn't cry, not immediately. Instead, a quiet numbness spread through her as she stared at the wall of her childhood bedroom, the same room she once decorated with posters and college acceptance letters. How strange, she thought, that life had led her right back here. She replayed the last few months with him, the sudden distance, the late nights at work, the excuses that never sounded quite right. She remembered the nights she stayed up alone waiting for him to come home, believing him when he blamed deadlines or traffic or team meetings. All the missing pieces began to click with painful precision, forming a picture she didn't want to see. The prank hadn't been a one-off cruelty, it had been a symptom, a clue. A loud siren signaling he had emotionally left long before she packed her things. The next wave of truth came less than a day later. More messages, more confirmations. He wasn't just staying at Soraya's place, he had been arriving at work with her, leaving work with her, laughing with her in the hallways like a man who had no commitments waiting at home. Their co-workers had seen them. Not once, not twice, for months. A betrayal that wasn't born from loneliness or misunderstandings but from entitlement, because he thought she would never leave, that she would never find out, that she would always be there to fund his life while he chased validation somewhere else. And as each detail surfaced, she realized something devastating. The prank hadn't been the moment he lost respect for her. That moment had happened long before, somewhere in the ordinary days she believed were safe. He had been living a double life while she was busy building a future he never intended to share. When he finally reached out to her, pretending to be confused by the idea of being linked to Soraya, she felt something inside her snap, not with rage, but with clarity. He denied everything, of course. Men like him always deny until truth becomes too heavy to outrun. But she wasn't the same woman who once bent herself into quiet corners to keep him comfortable. She didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't explain the evidence she now held. She simply told him what needed to be said. They were done. Truly done. The betrayal stung, yes, but strangely it also freed her. Because now she finally understood. She hadn't lost the man she loved. She had lost the illusion of who she thought he was. And losing an illusion wasn't loss at all. It was revelation. Painful, yes, but necessary. And now that the mask had fallen, she was ready for what came next. Something he would never see coming. Revenge didn't come to her like a lightning strike, it arrived quietly, like an idea that tiptoed into her mind when she least expected it. In the stillness of her old bedroom, the same one she once used to dream in as a girl, she realized something profound. He had humiliated her publicly, stripped her dignity for entertainment, and walked away without remorse. He didn't lose sleep, he didn't apologize, he didn't care. So why should she protect his comfort? Why should she carry the weight of fairness for someone who never gave her the same? She thought about the one thing he always talked about with genuine longing: fatherhood, becoming a dad someday. He spoke of it with a tenderness she rarely saw elsewhere. And in a twist of poetic justice, that tenderness would become the doorway to his own downfall. Not because she wanted to destroy him, but because she wanted him to feel, for once, something real. The plan unfolded with startling simplicity. A photo of a positive pregnancy test edited, just enough to look real. A carefully worded message filled with quiet seriousness. No threats, no dramatics. Just a truth she pretended to accept. I'm pregnant. It's yours. She sent it and waited, her heart pounding not with guilt, but with a sense of reclaiming power she didn't realize she still possessed. His response came within minutes, frantic, emotional, the complete opposite of the dismissiveness he had shown her for years. Suddenly he was the one clinging to the relationship. He was the one crying, begging, promising change, swearing he would step up, be better, be present. For the first time, he tasted uncertainty, fear, responsibility. She didn't gloat. She didn't revel in his panic. She let him feel exactly what she had felt the night he broke her heart, helplessness wrapped in hope. When they finally met in the apartment, her with her best friend beside her, him with flowers, gifts, trembling hands, she almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the arrogant confidence, the dismissive shrug, the mocking smirk. Instead, he was soft, fragile, desperate. He talked about fatherhood, about fixing things, about becoming a better man. He spoke of breaking ties with Soraya, of wanting a fresh start. She listened without interrupting, watching the fear in his eyes grow with every second he realized she wasn't smiling, wasn't softening, wasn't melting the way she once did. Then she said the one sentence that would haunt him forever. "Do you remember what you did on my birthday?" His face went pale. And before he could form an excuse, she delivered the truth with the same brutality he had once shown her. "It's a prank." 3 words that struck him harder than anything he had ever experienced. His knees hit the floor before he could catch himself, shock collapsing his body, grief pulling the air out of his lungs. She didn't laugh the way he had. She didn't celebrate his devastation. Her voice didn't hold cruelty, it held closure. He begged, really begged, tears streaming down his face, pleading for forgiveness, for another chance, for the pain to stop. But she had already given him too many chances he didn't deserve. She walked away not because she wanted revenge, but because she finally understood something life had been trying to teach her for years. Sometimes, justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, clean, and precise. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone, it's letting them see what they destroyed in you, and knowing they can never fix it. That day, he learned what heartbreak felt like. That day, he learned what true consequences felt like. And she walked away stronger than she had ever been. In the days after she told him the pregnancy was a lie, he spiraled. The man who once mocked her for being too emotional was now the one drowning in desperation. Calls, messages, emails from strange accounts, he tried everything. But she didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth had already hit him harder than any words could. And while he clung to the last shreds of hope, the real storm was forming silently behind him. Her father, a man of quiet authority, had watched the entire situation unfold with increasing fury. He saw not just a cruel prank, but a public humiliation recorded for entertainment. A violation of privacy, emotional distress, intentional harm. Things that, in the world of law, carried weight. So without theatrics, without hesitation, he began the process of filing a lawsuit. Not out of vengeance, but out of principle. Out of a father's instinct to protect a daughter whose heart had been crushed. When the official papers were served, the sound of his life cracking was almost audible. He read the documents with shaking hands, the legal language swirling into a blur of consequences he never imagined. He wasn't just being sued for emotional damages. His friend, the one gleefully recording her humiliation, was named too. The prank, which he once called content gold, was now listed under terms like intentional infliction of emotional distress and public defamation, words that carried financial penalties, career consequences, social fallout. Suddenly, the man who thought everything was a joke found himself in a situation he couldn't charm, manipulate, or laugh his way out of. He tried to call her again, his voice cracking in a voicemail she never listened to. He begged her to talk, to reconsider, to have mercy. But mercy wasn't his to request. He had forfeited it the night he traded her dignity for views. The court process moved faster than either of them expected. Witnesses from the restaurant stepped forward. Friends who had been present gave statements. Even people who had seen the video online submitted comments describing the cruelty they witnessed. Her father built the case with meticulous precision, dismantling every excuse, every attempt to minimize the damage. The judge listened closely, especially when therapy records were presented, proof of the anxiety, humiliation, and emotional turmoil she endured after the prank. And when the verdict came, it was clear. The justice system had no patience for cruelty disguised as entertainment. Both men were ordered to pay a substantial settlement, enough to make them feel every ounce of the pain they had caused, enough to shift the ground beneath their feet, enough to remind them that actions, especially public ones, carry consequences far beyond likes and views. The aftermath was immediate. Their YouTube channel lost subscribers by the thousands. Brands cut ties, collaborators stepped back. The internet, once their playground, became a courtroom of public opinion, and this time, sympathy wasn't on their side. People reposted the prank video with furious commentary. Others exposed their pattern of reckless content. Their reputations crumbled in real time. He lost work opportunities. His friend lost contracts. Both lost the illusion that they were invincible. For her, the chapter marked a turning point. The money from the lawsuit helped her rebuild her life. Yes, but the true victory wasn't financial. It was the validation. The acknowledgement that what she had endured wasn't overreacting, wasn't being dramatic, wasn't a joke gone wrong. It was harm. Real harm. And the world had finally said it out loud. As she watched them struggle under the weight of their own actions, she didn't feel joy. She felt peace. The kind of peace that comes when justice finally catches up to cruelty. Healing didn't happen overnight. It didn't sweep in dramatically or arrive wrapped in closure. It came slowly, in soft ways, in moments so small she almost missed them. The first time she woke up without checking her phone to see if he had tried to contact her. The first time she went a whole day without replaying the prank in her mind. The first time she really laughed without feeling guilty. Therapy became a lifeline, a place where she learned to separate her worth from her wounds. Her therapist helped her untangle the subtle forms of manipulation she once mistook for love. She learned how often she had silenced herself to keep the peace, how much of her life she had lived in response to someone else's moods. And for the first time in years, she began imagining a future that didn't revolve around fixing someone else. A future that belonged solely to her. With the settlement money, she bought a small condo, a space that reflected her, not them. She chose soft colors for the walls, bought furniture that made her feel warm, safe, grounded. No one criticized her decor. No one questioned her choices. No one made her feel small in her own home. In that quiet little space, she rediscovered the parts of herself she once abandoned. She cooked meals she enjoyed instead of ones he preferred. She played music at volumes that matched her moods. She wore clothes he never liked, but she always loved. And slowly that apartment transformed from a place of healing into a symbol of rebirth. She wasn't just starting over, she was returning to herself. Every corner, every shelf, every framed picture whispered the same reminder: you survived. And more importantly, you deserve better than what you left behind. Then, unexpectedly, love found her again, but not the way it had before. This time it didn't sweep in with intensity or grand gestures. It arrived gently with patience, through someone who didn't try to claim her healing as his accomplishment. Halil entered her life at a networking event, offering kindness without ulterior motives, interest without pressure. He didn't rush her or demand emotional access she wasn't ready to give. Instead, he learned her pace. He listened when she spoke and didn't flinch when she shared pieces of her past. His consistency, not his charm, won her over. He didn't just tell her she deserved peace, he helped her experience what peace actually felt like. For the first time, she was with someone who didn't dim her light, but admired how brightly she could shine. And slowly, almost timidly, she allowed her heart to remember what it felt like to feel safe. Months passed, and the emotional bruises that once felt permanent began to fade. She advanced in her career, built deeper friendships, traveled, and explored hobbies she didn't have time for before. Her life became fuller, warmer, more grounded than it had ever been. Happiness didn't feel fragile anymore, it felt earned. She realized healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about reclaiming the parts of herself she had lost along the way. And in the quiet moments, cooking in her own kitchen, reading on her balcony, laughing with Halil, she discovered something powerful. She was no longer defined by what had happened to her. She had walked through fire, yes, but she hadn't stayed there. She had risen, rebuilt, reclaimed. The ashes of her past weren't a reminder of what was destroyed. They were the soil from which her new life was growing. Karma rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock, doesn't boast, doesn't demand applause. It simply arrives when the time is right, quiet, precise, and devastatingly fair. Months after she rebuilt her life and found peace with Halil, she received a message from her best friend. Turn on the news. She expected something ordinary, maybe an accident on a highway or a weather alert. She did not expect to see the faces of the two men who had once laughed at her heartbreak, plastered across the screen under the word arrested. The newscaster's voice was calm, almost detached, as she explained how a recent prank orchestrated by the pair had gone horribly wrong, resulting in a severe panic attack for an unsuspecting woman and multiple criminal charges. As she stood in her living room, remote still in hand, a strange sensation washed over her. Not joy, not revenge, not spite, but justice. Pure, unmistakable justice. The world reacted swiftly. Clips of the incident spread across social media, followed by outrage, criticism, and a collective sense of disbelief. People resurfaced their old video, the one where she had been humiliated, using it as evidence that this wasn't a one-time mistake, but a pattern. Comment sections filled with thousands of voices condemning the cruelty, the recklessness, the lack of empathy. Their names, once associated with entertainment, now became synonymous with irresponsibility and emotional violence. Sponsors cut ties, collaborators disappeared. Even their loyal followers couldn't defend them anymore. She watched the unfolding chaos with a stillness she didn't quite understand. Once, his actions had shattered her sense of self. Now, the universe had answered in its own time, in its own way, showing everyone exactly who they had been all along. She didn't have to fight anymore. The truth was fighting for her. When their trial concluded months later, the verdict was harsh but deserved. The judge condemned their behavior as dangerous, negligent, and devoid of basic humanity. The sentence? Prison time, fines, and mandatory rehabilitation. Seeing their mugshots again, hollow eyes, shaken expressions, she didn't feel triumph. She felt distance. As if she were looking at strangers she once briefly knew, men who had chosen cruelty over compassion, ego over responsibility. The version of her who once cried for him, who once feared losing him, who once believed she couldn't live without him, that woman was long gone. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone who had learned what real love felt like, who had built a life grounded in respect instead of sacrifice. Someone who no longer feared breaking alone because she had learned how to rebuild herself. Watching them be held accountable only confirmed what her heart already understood. She had escaped just in time. Life had a way of closing circles beautifully. Months after the sentencing, Halil proposed in the most tender, intimate way. No audience, no spectacle, no performance, just love. Real, steady, unwavering love. As she stood in her kitchen wearing the ring he placed gently on her finger, she realized this wasn't the ending of her story, it was the beginning. A beginning built not on illusions or manipulation, but on trust, growth, and the courage she had found within herself. And as she looked back, not with pain, but with clarity, she finally understood a truth she wished she had known years earlier. Sometimes, the universe breaks your heart not to punish you, but to remove the person who was never meant to hold it. Karma wasn't cruel. It was corrective. It placed him exactly where his choices led him. And it placed her exactly where her strength carried her. Free, loved, whole, and finally truly happy.